Over my career, I spent a lot of time thinking about the state of education. And what brought it to mind was as I was trying to hire very highly technical resources, and I couldn't find people that could even interview for those jobs. And I'm also a mom, and I worried a lot about my child's education, and were they getting a good enough education that they could participate in American society. So I took a job at Dallas ISD 2012, so huge career change. Dallas ISD is a very large school district, roughly 12th in the United States. We have 162,000 kids. There's 10,600 teachers, and we have a $1.6 billion budget. There's 233 schools, but they're spread across 384 square miles. Including Dallas, but many other cities. We have lots of challenges, right? 90% of our students are economically disadvantaged. I think we're second only to Chicago. A lot of people don't think of Dallas that way. 40% of our students have limited English. The demographics in Dallas are very different from the demographics in our public schools. But demographics in our public schools, 70% Hispanic, 24% African American, and 5% white. One of the most staggering statistics that keeps blowing through my head is only 14.4% of our graduates are college ready. College ready means they got a 21 or higher on the ACT, they got a 990 or higher on the math and reading portion of the SAT. That's our definition of college ready. And that means they're capable of taking an entry-level class at a community college, 14.4%. And no one can look at that statistic and say, okay, we're doing a great job. So one of the things that's really puzzling, though, is that Dallas ISD has some of the best schools in the nation, year after year. Our magnet schools are at the top of the list. So clearly we can get it right. We just haven't got it right across the board. This is a problem that's been going on for decades. This is from 1980. The chaos must end. It's a 3-ring circus only with 5 rings. So this is the culture and these decades-long problem that we've been going through. When I started in 2012, we began to ask questions. How many 8th grade math teachers do we need to hire? No one could answer the question. Well, how do I answer that? Well, you'll have to call the principals. Well, there's 44 of them. Well, that's how you get the answer. How many of our buses arrive on time? What's the percentage of on-time arrivals? Oh, we don't track that. What percent of our employees, what's the attendance rate for our employees? They didn't even know where the data was. So simple operational data that you would expect to be at the fingertips of the superintendent of the schools was invisible to him. My job, I'm not in IT. I took a job as special projects officer. I was focused on the fires, the things that he needed someone like a SWAT team to focus on. But over time, more and more often, I ended up on the data side. One of the things that really stumbled me was how many businesses Dallas ISD is in. We do everything from real estate to custodial to fleet maintenance. Imagine the maintenance of school buildings. We have glaziers, we have plumbers, we have electricians. So there's this enormous business that DISD is in. But then when I got to IT, they only have 200 employees. 87 are desktop services. That means they're out in the field helping people with their laptops in the classroom. 40 are network services. We know what they're doing. So very few people actually focused on back-end systems. We have 2 TBAs. They're both contractors. That scares me. And this is where they work. Gotta love that. I drove by it multiple times the first time I went to visit it. That can't possibly be it. But yet, that's where our operations and our IT folks work. Well, why is that? You can't spend money on things like that, you need to spend money on the classrooms. That's way more important. So it's very hard to attract people to come work for DISD in the technical field. Would you want to work there? There's 120 student-facing systems. Now remember, 2 DBAs. 120 student-facing systems, and it's generating an enormous amount of data. Before I came, there was a $14 million dashboard that was developed. Some of the brightest minds in the industries developed it, but before I even arrived, it had been shut down for disuse. No one used it. There were reasons. It didn't have a time dimension. That's the problem, but a $14 million fail. In January of this year, the superintendent came to me and said, Kerri, you wrote the definition for what we need in the dashboard, and you did a prototype. Can you just finish the project? And I said, well, what are you sure? I'll be happy to. So that was in January. He assigned it to me. It took till April to actually acquire the software that we chose to use. It's called ClickView. My deadline was May. We made it. So we released the dashboards in May, and we released them to the public, to our board of directors in June. So in 4 months, we were able to go from nothing to something I think is really powerful. This is part of the data map. Kind of looks like gobbledygook, but those of you who know, you understand what this is about. I had to manually scrub every single one of these. So no one else could touch the data, no one else. Why is there a record for employee absences and no hours? Why is there hours but no date? I had to learn what caused all of those things and fix the data in order for us to be able to report on them. So I think you'll find it very interesting to see what we came up with. So this is a Dallas ISD performance management dashboard. It has 120 different systems connected. One of the things that was really important was that you had to be able to interact with the data. So at any time you can make selections on data, and wherever you go, that selection persists. So I just flipped from college ready on the first page to enrollment statistics, and we can see exactly the enrollment at those schools. We can also look at locations. So our schools are grouped by feeder pattern, and a lot of times there's so many that it's really hard for me to keep straight in my head where they are and what feeder pattern they're in. And so this is the first time we've had an interactive map that allowed us to zoom in on schools. And that was very powerful. And these are things that in our industry we've seen for a long time, but none of this was available at the school district level. So we graphed all sorts of things. Everything we could get our hands on, we graphed. This is an example of college readiness. It was very enlightening. You know, if you look at some of these schools, it's crystal clear how troubled those high schools are. This is PSAT results. Now, the ones at the bottom, those are the #1 high schools in the nation. But those at the top, we have so much work to get to do. We did the same thing for all sorts of things like our state tests. So you can flip back and forth between many years. These are our semester exams. This is one of the really interesting graphs that we did. First semester exams, kids who passed versus the kids who didn't pass second semester. What schools? In other words, they taught really well kind of at the beginning and slacked off towards the end. And those popped up really quick. Enrollment. We did a lot of studies on where kids are going. One of the really enlightening studies where these are all of the comprehensive high schools, and these are the transfers out. So green is a magnet transfer out, and yellow was just get me out. And so it was very enlightening to see which schools our kids were fleeing from and what schools were attracting our kids. We also did a study on discipline. Discipline was very interesting. There had been a report presented for years. It was in a book. It came out every 6 weeks, and it was spread over so many pages, none of these correlations were obvious. You can see on our offenses, where does it happen? It happens all at middle school. And when we move into the discipline, which is the consequences for those, we began to see, where we had out-of-bounds conditions. This is just middle school, so I just selected middle schools on the side. It just selected all of them for me. And we can see what schools have discipline issues. And here's a school that does a way more out-of-school suspensions than in-school suspensions. So they tend to go straight to the most hardest discipline that they can, and they don't have series of steps in between. Removals by age. This is suspensions by age. Again, you see those middle school kids just pop out. I'll clear this selection for middle school, and you can see it against all the rest of the kids. We have lost instruction time. Lost instruction time to me is any absence. So it could be an excused absence, an unexcused absence, or some kind of suspension. And then we plotted it geographically, and we were looking for trends, and we found some interesting things. It wasn't what we thought. Daily attendance, this was something that we are funded based on the ADA, the average daily attendance for school. And so we plotted it over years, and just looking at high schools, it was really clear really quick that our problem was attendance was primarily at our high schools. One of the things that I talk about a lot is how much time we spent preparing reports for various entities before this, just to get enrollment of the school. So can you tell me how many kids are in 6th grade? That was very hard to do. And now it's something that's very simple. So I'll clear all the selections. In the past, it took 2 or 3 days to get that answer. So let's say you want to know how many kids are in 6th grade. Now you have it, and you want it in Excel because you're going to use it somewhere else. That's it. That's how long it takes. Now you send that to whoever it needs to be done. So we just shaved literally 99% of the time off of that. One of the hardest things we did was focusing on our employees. That data wasn't well reported, but some of the things that really stood out to us, this is new hires. I told you at the beginning we have as much as 20% turnover in our teacher ranks every year. Well, imagine the job that it takes every summer to replace all of those teachers. And you can see that crystal clear on our new hires. One of the other things we had read and seen studies that talked about that there was chronic absenteeism in large urban districts. Most teachers work 178 days, and they're granted 8 days of vacation. And yet, when we began to graph average days out per employee, it's a little bigger than 8. So it held up to be true. The other thing that was really interesting, get rid of my selections, this giant Monday, Friday trend. I'm sure this is something that's common, but this is a huge problem in education. So one of the things that was interesting was that because I had prepped all this data, I could see insights. I could see, wait, I think this school must have cheated. There's no way that they went from the bottom of the list 3 years in a row to the top of the list in 1 year. It's just not possible. Or there's something really odd going on in this school for discipline. We need to go check it out. That was obvious to me, but it wasn't to my users. If you're a principal, it's like your hair's on fire all day long. You don't have a lot of time to do this. If you're going to focus on discipline, then going to this dashboard was something that was good. You could go in, you could see where you fared against other schools. But if you're just trying to manage day to day, what are my biggest problems right now? You had to really pull it out of all of these graphs. And so one of the things that we started working on this summer, and I know this is something you've been doing for a long time, but how do we pull automated insights? The things that I could see, how could we begin to pull that out and report that to our constituents? And so we began with automated insights. And very interestingly, some of the things that I knew obviously just started popping up on our automated insights. So what did we learn? We learned that there's no such thing as too much analysis. Everybody's like, oh, Kerri, you can't put any more visualizations. There's like 250 in the app. But what I learned every single time we did one, something popped out that we didn't know. So we found that the more that we did, the better it was. Our users don't have the skills to see the trends, the out-of-bounds conditions, or inconsistencies. So just doing the visualization didn't solve our problems. We had to take it further. We couldn't take no for an answer. Can't tell you how many times we went after data. They said, oh, you can't have it. It's in a PDF. Like, well, send me the PDF. We'll key it in. And as soon as we just wouldn't take no for an answer, and we got every single piece of data in there, it really made a huge difference in how we operated. The skill sets were not on staff in our organization. I did most of this by myself. In many, many late nights, lots of weekends. And our 2 DBAs were swamped. They couldn't help me. And then we just didn't have any other staff to work on it. The manual cleaning was unbelievable. I mean, to clean up the employee attendance data, which had never been queried before, took so many hours. And of course, we learned we need more than 2 DBAs. I knew that. But what did it change? We started thinking differently. And then, of course, to actually change things in education, you have to be courageous and you have to take action. So providing access to information was key. It wasn't available. There were so many questions that you couldn't get answers to. All those different systems, you had to be able to see it all at one time. Having paper reports wheeled in on a cart wasn't doing anything. There were lots of problems that were masked. We had to focus on the right issues. There were so many things that we had to do. So this think differently, act courageously became our motto. And what did it change? They're calling it the Dallas Miracle. And for decades, they measure school districts in quartiles. And generally, Dallas ISD has been in the 3rd quartile, never moved out of it for decades. And in 1 year, we popped into the top of the 2nd quartile. And it's a result of lots of changes that were supported by data. This is a different way to look at it. Different metrics that they're tracking. Going down is a good thing. So entering this year, this is my 3rd school year. Entering this year, we have some interesting and very promising results. We have $300 million in the bank. It's a big deal. Our school district isn't operating in the red. If something happened and funding stopped, our school district could continue to operate for 3 to 4 months. In the past, on the first day of school, there were an enormous number of vacancies, teacher vacancies in the classroom. In 2012, there were 860 on the first day out of 9,600 teachers. This year, we only had 14. Huge change. All of our kids eat for free. At 90% free and reduced lunch, it was actually cheaper for us just to feed them all for free than collect money for that other 10%. There were lots of other accomplishments that we have backed by data. We took our principals to performance pay. And now it's tied to their compensation is tied to their performance. Our Teacher Excellence Initiative, which does the same thing, it takes teachers off of tenure and puts them on performance pay. That was passed by our board in the spring, and it started this school year. We have, Obama challenged schools to speed up the internet so that we could have communication speeds in the classroom that were high. And we did that, but we did 20 gigabytes to the classroom because we believe that personalized learning is where our district's going by 2020. We're going to open 4 to 8 personalized learning schools next school year. So this is very important to us. The other thing was fence to fence. It was really important that kids could not be inside the school, but near the school and get access to the internet. In many of our poor neighborhoods, the kids don't have a device. They don't go home to a computer and internet access. So we began in one of our initiatives a one-to-one device where we're going to send it home with the kids. We also installed wireless paid for by DISD in a lot of high-density housing. And then Destination 2020 is our strategic plan, and we now have all these benchmark data, and we can actually measure. And I know that sounds like, duh, isn't that what you should do? But it wasn't available. This is what our Teacher Excellence Initiative looks like. Every kind of teacher has different ways they need to be evaluated. So this pie chart looks different across the board. 50% is based on spot observations. How do you handle your classroom? What is your classroom management style? Are you prepared? So 10 spot observations and formal observations, 50%. 15% is based on student surveys. That was proven out through some scientific research. And then this rest of it is based on student achievement, but many different metrics. So not heavily weighted to the state exams or the AP exam, but a mixture of things. The other thing that's really interesting is working to pull the pay out so that our best teachers can make a lot more money. And I think that's really important in acquiring new people into our field and to encourage the kind of professionalism that we want. So this year, we're going to focus a lot more on insights. I showed you a little bit of that. This personalized learning, that's going to be really important, and a lot of the back end of what we do has to change. If you think about schools, it's all based on semesters, scheduling at a semester. But who said Algebra 1 has to take exactly 2 semesters? So we want to loosen up the time frame and allow kids to take as long as they need to complete classes. One of the things we spend a lot of time working on is equitable access. There's definitely not equitable access to our best teachers. Our best teachers are in those magnet schools that are the best in the country. And we've got to really work on how do we ensure that all of our kids have an effective, awesome teacher teaching their class. Counselor evaluations. Counselors are working with our children on social emotional issues, but they're also the ones that counsel them on what classes they should enroll in. Evaluating those rigorously is going to be very important. Coaching, holding our coaches get extra money for coaching. We need to hold them accountable for what they're doing. In the past, it's been, okay, you're a coach, and there was not a lot of oversight. We're taking our human resources and our finance dashboards and really diving deep so that we understand lots of things in the past we haven't even begun to think about. This is what personalized learning looks like to me. We think about all of these back-end systems that I have to glue together and all of these places where it's very rigid, maybe in time, that we have to bust through all of that. And so I spent a lot of my time thinking about how we're going to take all of the different things that we have and glue them together to offer an awesome education that's personalized to the child based on where they are. And I think this is kind of the next great step that we have to make. And a lot of the things that I think about is there's so many curriculum on how to teach photosynthesis. And we know that possibly that photosynthesis exercise works really well with this type of kids, but not this type of kids. You know, think of ranking that's pervasive in the other industries. We're going to have to get good at that. So I hope you'll all watch us as we continue down our very brave and bold path as we work to improve education in Dallas.